I'm doing very well, thank you.
Sorry, I'm a couple of minutes late. I think guess Katie just joining us.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Barnaby, you've got that cool background there, of the album, the picture album. How do I get one of those?
He's very cool.
Well,
I need something more interesting than what's going on back here behind me.
you don't want to see what's behind me. That's the only reason it's there.
Yeah. Well, I'm talking with Barnaby Smith and Katie Jeffries-Harris. They're both members of the wonderful vocal ensemble Voces8. Barnaby is also the artistic director. Thanks, guys, for taking a little time this afternoon.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. We're here to talk about this new album, Infinity, which I've got right here. You see it matches your background there, right, Barnaby? It's beautiful music, a lot of incredible stuff on here. It's like a journey in sound that I had never experienced before. I mean, there are a lot of composers on here I don't know, some that I do know, some that I know in different versions, like the original version that have been arranged for you. So let's go back a little bit and talk about Voces8. For folks who don't know, you're an ensemble, you're based in England. How did it all begin for the group?
Well, it was a bit of a fluke, to be honest, sort of by luck. My brother and I founded the group 16 years ago. And
you don't look that old. You were like 5 years old when you founded the group.
You've made his day.
I wish. Thank you very much indeed. And we were all members of a youth choir originally, the original 8 members. And when we graduated the youth choir, I used to essentially arrange parties at my parents' house. And there was a bit of singing involved. And we accidentally entered a competition. I genuinely didn't really realize I'd entered it. It just looked like a free holiday. And when we got there, it was a very serious singing competition. And we actually ended up winning it. And people started asking us to sing concerts. And so we thought, well, hang on a minute. Maybe we could make this our living. And here we are 16 years later.
Wow, that's amazing. Katie, have you been with the group from the beginning or did you come in later?
I have not been with the group since the beginning. I joined, I think it's about now 3 years ago. And I actually joined Voces8 through their Scholars Programme. So we run a programme for young singers, both in the UK and the US, but we have applicants from all over the world. And that's a training year where you're working quite closely with Voces8. And for some reason, they decided they still fancied keeping me on after that year. So they're stuck with me now.
I was going to ask what the audition, requirements are to get into the group or what the hazing would be to become a member of the group. You guys have such a distinctive sound, which is really on full display in this latest album release, but it's so clean, it's so pure, it's so beautiful. I wonder, Barnaby, and maybe you as well, Katie, can speak a little bit to the musical aesthetic behind what it is that you do, what you create with your voices.
Well, we tried to take 8 voices and create, a lot of the time, we try to create one voice, one instrument from 8 voices, if you see what I mean. And I think with this album, especially, a lot of research was done by our record label about how people like to listen to core music, especially on the streaming platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, that sort of thing. And it came across that people like to chill out, relax, meditate to the sorts of music that we sing. And so we decided that we would try to take that concept and give it as much artistic weight as we possibly could. So we commissioned some new music and we commissioned a whole set of new arrangements to try and almost give this element of through composition to a 65, 70 minute disc. And so much of the time on the album, people comment to us that we're singing maybe just vocalises, so there's not so much text involved. But a lot of the time we're trying to make a very unique sound by not just singing straight onto the voice, but by finding the edge of the vocal folds. So some people will call that whistle tone, as though you're whistling, just using the edge of the lips. And it's quite a similar thing that we try to do in Voces8, just finding the very outside of the voice, and it gives this very ethereal and floated sound. And over the past probably 10 years, people have come to know that to be, in inverted commas, a Voces8 sound, because I think probably we're the only group out there who are doing it a lot, and we spend a lot of time thinking about it. And as you say, it's on full display here. Another thing maybe Katie can talk about, you'd be bored of the sound of my voice now, is also the way that we control the vibrato, which is another very important thing. We do use vibrato, but we use it specifically as a color rather than a default. So
yeah, Katie, how is that from your perspective?
I think it's one of the hardest things that you learn when you join the group, because it's a style of singing that many of us who join Voces8 come through the English choral tradition, where it's very on voice, and you're doing often quite big music when you're doing evensong. And this is you're taking quite a lot of the weight out of the voice, and as Barney says, you're just letting the voice float. So it takes time and it takes concentration. I think we at the end of the day, as well as being possibly a little bit vocally tired because you are using your voice in a very specific way, also mentally tired from the challenge of working out how to create the sound. But it's something that is so fulfilling to listen back to, and it's really interesting listening in the room whilst you're recording, because what you're hearing on disc is exactly the same as what's in the room. We record with I think it's just a pair of us and nothing else. So it's you are living in that space, and it's a beautiful atmosphere to be a part of.
Well, listening to it myself, I stand in awe. I can imagine being one of the performers and listening and thinking, I helped make that, right? Has to be a wonderful experience. Also, the spaces, though, are very important, I imagine, where you capture the voice and where you sing. I mean, this album, this whole concept of infinity and the music you have on here seems to be just a perfect extension of what it is that you do, because where you perform, the space you're in is very important. A lot of this music deals with different incarnations of space. And if I were to ask you individually, what does that title mean to you, Infinity? If I were to ask you, what does it mean to you? What would your answer be?
It seems like such a straightforward question, doesn't it? But it's a really difficult answer.
Yeah.
For me, I mean, I'm a very practical person. So the initial thing that pops into my head is it should be something that could keep going forever. And so by that, I actually mean sonically. It's really interesting that you talk about the space that we record in. We actually recorded this in our own church in London, which has got a gorgeous acoustic. And it's just 2 microphones. And I just have this image of the sound drifting past the microphones and just continuing forever. That for me is how if I could describe it in words, what I would go with. Just something that can forever continue.
So, Katie, what does infinity mean for you, besides thinking, that this rehearsal is going on forever? That sort of thing.
How would you think ever, do you, Kate?
No, absolutely not. For me, I think we've already spoken about so much of the music on the disc is textless. It's lots of vowels, lots of oohs and ahs, and for me, it's the infinity. It's the infinite possibilities of what that music might mean to you, the way that it can interact with your life or with what you're doing in the moment. Yeah.
Let's talk about, in the time, some of the music you've got on here, because there's a wide variety, even though it all sounds like it was, sort of connected somehow. You got a big variety of composers here. Some of them I'd heard of, some of them I didn't know. Some of them I went back and listened to their albums, and I thought that sounds completely different from the acoustic arrangement that you're doing. But you had some pieces written just for this disc, including the title track, which comes like right in the very middle of the album, that piece by Anne Lovett, Infinity. You want to start with that and just tell us a little bit about that piece, and we can branch out.
Sure. Well, I think it's always interesting, the process of commissioning. We as an ensemble like to give a composer or an arranger as much scope as we possibly can. Now, this particular piece by Anne is something that she had previously conceived as a string piece, and she'd brought it in and sort of tried to change it to work for voices. And a really important part of that was the fact that she actually came to the recording session, and we spent a good 3 or 4 hours working with her, just experimenting with the different textures that exist on the page. And I think the thing that stands out to me most about this work is the fact it's in sections. And actually, when we were recording it, they felt quite a bit like Lego bricks, like they were a little bit different to each other. But actually, for me, when I listen to the whole thing, that has become a really nice sort of journey through the modular almost, and I love it. Something to listen out for is that the very first note that the high soprano sings is the high C that you have in a very famous choral piece. Allegri's Miserere Mei is known for this high C. It's about the highest note that ever comes in choral music ever. Yeah. And Andrea just has to sing it out of absolutely nothing at the beginning of the piece. And I remember when she first saw the score, she was like, really?
It's tenor class.
She is phenomenal on this album. I thought what she does with her voice, the gymnastics, is just amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. What for you, Katie, was the biggest challenge in recording this music?
I think the biggest challenge for me in recording this music, sometimes when you've got a piece on the page that's been written for instruments and that's going into voice, trying to find what direction you want to choose with it. As Barney said, we were lucky that with quite a lot of the pieces we had the composer in the room, so we could play with them in a way sonically, with trying to draw out what we can from the music. But with some of them, they're new arrangements, you have them landed on your desk, and it ends up being a bit of a conversation between everybody at the table as to, okay, so where are we aiming for? What structure are we actually going to go for? What's the peak of the piece? And we spend a lot of time changing things like the vowels. So whatever gets given to us isn't necessarily the finished project or the finished score. So working with that and trying to find our way and what suits us and suits the piece.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, I imagine the reward is tremendous, going through that process. We don't have much time left, but I do want to talk briefly about your online activities and your reaction to the pandemic. I mean, singing took a big hit during this global pandemic, and you did a lot as far as engaging with audiences virtually. And you're back on tour now, like physically on tour, right?
We are, yeah. About 15 concerts in.
That's amazing. I want to mention that you're coming to the States. You're coming stateside. Yeah. You're going to be in Cincinnati, which is just a stone's throw away from here. And I've got the date here. We'll mention that on our website when we post this. And when I talk about it on the radio, we'll mention that
thank you.
You all are coming to see us in Cincinnati. Some folks, they may jump in the car and make the drive down and say, hey, I heard about you up in Toledo. And if they do, let me know.
Of course.
I appreciate it. If there were a track for us to go out on, you had to pick a song that I should play.
Well, I've got, tell about you, Katie, I've probably got 2 favorites on the album. I think my 2 favorites are Helium Life Jacket and the wonderful Icelandic hymn, Her himnas miður. Those are my 2 top picks. Yeah. I don't know about you, Katie. What do you?
And it's much better that you pronounce that piece instead of me.
Not sure I even did it right, but we did get some coaching. So I'm going to be in the ballpark.
What do you say, Katie?
I'd go for, I'll copy Barney, I'll go for 2. I love the title track, Infinity, and also In the Shining Blackness, I think is gorgeous.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's the last one that I listened to before I talked to you guys. That's great. Well, Barnaby Smith and Katie Jeffries-Harris, members of the Voces8 vocal ensemble. The new album is called Infinity. We'll link to all of that from our website, as well as your website, because you got a lot of stuff going on there as well for people to look at. Thank you both for joining me, spending a little time talking about this. And thank you most of all for these beautiful recordings and for this wonderful music. So glad that I was able to share it with our listening audience.
Pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you
Okay.
very much.